picked up Yakuza 7 with the system.
Look at me, unaware of the journey that this series was about to take me on. I first heard about Like a Dragon when Yakuza 0 launched way back in 2017. I was listening to one of the Easy Allies podcasts, and how they were describing the game sounded amazing. At the same time, I started getting compilations recommended to me on YouTube about how funny and weird the game was. Although I didn't immediately get into it. Things went quiet for me up until around, I want to say 2019, when one of my buddies was trying to get me and a few other friends into the series. He showed off Majima's intro in Zero and some other stuff from the game. I liked what I saw, but I still didn't try to get into it. What I needed was a soft reboot in a genre I love. Yakuza 7 was announced to be an Xbox Series X launch title, and I finally decided to pull the trigger. This video is one I've had planned for a very long time. I initially brought this idea up in my 2021 Game of the Year video, and then did it again last year. Never have I played the 8th mainline game in a series and said to myself, I gotta go play every game in this series right now. Shoutouts to Game Pass for making that possible. I have marathon series in the past, but it's normally ones I've already played. As a result, Like a Dragon has been a consistent thing in my life since November 2020 when I got my Series X. To get this out of the way, if you haven't noticed, I'm going to be referring to the series as Like a Dragon. Sega recently changed the name in the West to line up more with the Japanese name, but I'll be calling each individual game Yakuza, insert number here. I'll also be calling Yakuza Like a Dragon, Yakuza 7. I'm really happy they decided to go with the Resident Evil 7 Biohazard route for that one, only to immediately change the name of the series. I want to talk about the individual grades that apply to all of the games before moving on to each individual saga. Like a Dragon has the best city design in the entire industry. In my opinion, open world games have kind of fallen into the worst possible timeline for the genre. Maps have gotten bigger and bigger, but it feels like the amount of meaningful content hasn't grown alongside them. I hate this trend. I don't fucking care if you made the biggest map ever until the next AAA open world game comes out the following November. If it takes a long time to go from one side of the map to the other with not enough stuff between, congrats. You just made a big, empty, boring map. Made even worse if the movement isn't fun. I think people are getting tired of massive maps. One of the reasons why I love Breath of the Wild as much as I do is because it feels like there's stuff around every corner. But Breath of the Wild is in the minority when it comes to open world games for me. Spider-Man PS4 is the only recent one I've played where I've enjoyed the map as much, and it has better movement. I've never been a fan of GTA 5's map. It's very big, but it's essentially filled with empty boxes you can't go in, and driving around isn't fun enough to make up for it. I remember before I played it, I just assumed I would be able to enter more buildings than I actually could. I was very disappointed to find out that you could only really enter shops, some houses, and stuff that's required for story missions. Guess which series is the only one to give me what I thought I would be getting out of open world games? This one. Like a Dragon does something that I think more games should choose over going bigger. Kamurocho is small, but packed. In Lost Judgment, it took me under a minute to run from the south end to the north end of the district. I've always been that weirdo that doesn't like fast traveling in some games. I never fast traveled in Persona 5 Royal, and comparing my playtime to my friends, I spent 20 hours just walking in that game. I do acknowledge that I am the weirdo with my general disdain of fast travel. Out of every game in Kamurocho, I don't think I ever fast traveled to get anywhere faster because you never needed to. Maybe it's because I'm a cityite, but I love going around a walkable downtown core. I love big cities, okay? In Spider-Man PS4, I would just run a few blocks sometimes. Only issue there is that there's nothing to do street level, so I'd eventually just go back to web swinging. That's where Kamurocho has a leg up on Spider-Man's New York. There's stuff to do on the street, outside of enemy encounters. There's minigames on practically every street. There's so many things to do in such a small area, I think most people I know couldn't afford rent there. And it's a minute away from a subway station. It's a great location minus the gang wars that happen every other year. I don't think I've played an open world game that has as many minigames, shops, and restaurants in the small space that Kamurocho takes up. Another thing that makes the map design good is that it's a pretty simple layout and it sticks with you. I remember when I was playing Yakuza 5 and I first got back to Kamurocho, I thought to myself, okay, stop doing the thing I've done in literally every Like a Dragon game where I forget to buy healing items before I run into a boss fight, so go to the drugstore. Then I just completely zoned out, ran around the town, fought some guys. A little bit later, I realized I was zoned out and I was just wandering about. I was going to open up the map to see how far away I was from the store until I realized when I turned my camera to the left that I ended up right beside it. I don't think I've ever subconsciously walked to a location in a video game like I have in real life. Just head completely empty, go to Tim's, grab ice cap. It's the most real walking around in a game has ever felt for me. That's why when I zoned back in, I was shocked to find I was exactly where I wanted to go. But I guess that's what happens when you spend probably around 250 hours in one map over the course of 10 games. Granted, in Final Fantasy XIV, I never learned the layout of the town I spent most of my time in. For every game after that happened, I would just see where the objective was on the map and go. I just have paths I take to go to different sections. It's the only time in a video game I actively ignored the minimap, which was helpful because Judgment did not have the option to make it rotate. I watched a video of someone walking through the district Kamurocho is based off of, Kabukicho, and it was so surreal. I want to go there just to see how well I can navigate the area based off of the games. When I got to Lost Judgment, I found I was just reminiscing while walking around the city. It was the latest game in the series while I was playing it. I would think about all the story fights in front of New Serena, the raid you do on the Loan Shark's office in Zero, the many standoffs in front of the Millennium Tower, the bar Kiryu finds Haruka in. My only complaint about Kamurocho is what they did to one of my favorite places in Zero. The vibes were perfect in this area, and then they tore it all down for a skyscraper. A complaint that is all too real. They tore down the cool shops for a giant building. More so than any other series, the city is a living, breathing entity. It evolves as the games go on, and you can feel the impact of some events. If you watched my video on 2022's releases, you would know that my biggest fear for Tears of the Kingdom and Spider-Man 2 is the map. Here, I cited the originals as good maps. So why am I worried about them? In Miles Morales, I got bored of running around New York again. I spent 60 hours getting the Platinum in Spider-Man PS4. In Miles Morales, I was so whatever on running around the same map, but now the stuff is just in a different area. The map is so big and the movement is basically the same, so I just didn't care. For over 2 years, I've had this thought. And in those 2 years, there hasn't been a single time I've had that thought towards Kamurocho. There were probably days where I would complain about Miles Morales' map, and I never thought about how Kamurocho's basic layout never changed over the course of 10 games. It's definitely helped by Kamurocho not being the only map you explore in most of the games. I just think this series is in the Goldilocks zone of map size. And most of the other cities they made, I love running around too. The only one I didn't like was that snowy city from 5. I don't remember its name. And Jincho is definitely the biggest I would want these maps to be. It feels massive compared to Kamurocho, and it's only 3 times bigger. The map design is brilliant in every game. Honestly, before writing this video, I had no idea I had this much to say about open world map design. I don't think I like open world games that much. But that's not the only thing that carries over from game to game. Like a Dragon is really fucking funny. This series, after 10 games, is still able to get a laugh out of me. By the time I thought I saw everything by Yakuza 3, they just casually dropped this scene. I always feel like I've seen everything whenever I start a new game, but it's still able to surprise me and make me laugh. The sub-stories do a great job of making the city feel lived in, and are an amazing source of comedy. They're easily the most out-of-pocket side quests I've ever seen in a game. I'm never going to forget walking up to a group of guys who are all seemingly peeing in the river, and I have to pick which one I think is the culprit. But then some of the side quests can pull on the heartstrings a bit. And by the end, they actually have something to say. Like a Dragon, Psychonauts 2, and Everything Everywhere All at Once made me realize one thing I love about media. I love it when a thing can make it feel like literally anything could happen, and it has a lot of heart. When I approach a side quest in these games, I literally don't know what to expect. A lot of people meme on the fact that the creator of this series is the guy that made Monkey Ball. When I heard about that before playing these games, I was confused how that happened. After playing them, it makes perfect sense. One huge aspect of Monkey Ball is the minigames, and Like a Dragon is no different. It's safe to expect a bunch of small ones and 1 or 2 big ones in every Like a Dragon game. The Cabaret Club from 0 and 2 and the real estate from 7 are some of my favorites. They were incredibly fun to manage, and I really enjoyed it. The real estate minigame in 7 was fucking surprising for me to see because it was such a huge change of pace from the rest of the game. Dragon Kart was crazy for me to see, but a kart racer kind of just fits in more, except, you know, it's still like a Dragon game, so shit like this still happens in the business simulator part of it.
My partners and shareholders, please accept my most humble apology.
I'm never going to forget unlocking the cab minigame in 5 and assuming it's going to be like Crazy Taxi. And then it was a super hardcore cab simulator. You lose points for braking too hard and failing to signal. I just wasn't expecting them to go that hard into it. Then there's a racing minigame tied to the cab that isn't realistic at all. Like a Dragon is just expertly able to shift tones like this. I think it's able to do that because these moments really humanizes their leads. These games follow serious guys, except for Ichiban, going through serious situations. But at the end of the day, they're still human. They have hobbies, they go to the bar with friends, play darts, hit up a club. Yeah, they got a plot to go through, but when you have something happening in your life, do you shut out everything else? They're also awkward enough characters that them getting wrapped up in these sitcom situations makes sense. Having a handful of things constantly 10 seconds away from the player helps sink that in for me. It's like Disney World's garbage can placement. In other open world games, you can go play minigames, but it feels different here because of the ease of access, and oh no, I'm talking about map design again. You can play darts and go bowling in GTA, but a lot of the times I found I would only really go do it if another character hit me up. You have to actively decide, yeah, I want to waste time going to the nearest tennis court if I want to play a round right now. Odds are, you won't be anywhere near it because the maps are so big. I went bowling so many times in Zero just because I walked by the bowling alley and thought to myself,
yeah, I've got time.
Stuff like that just helps the characters feel real to me. 7 had a mechanic where if you had the right party members in certain areas, they'll just start talking to each other about how they got sloshed at this bar that one time. It's like the skits from Tales of. Stuff like that just makes the characters feel real because it establishes that they had a life in this town before the player showed up. Most of the stuff I mentioned so far works because of one key thing: the writing. To keep it broad, Like a Dragon's attitude towards organized crime is one I find kind of rare in media. In the characters' backstories, they were actively told by other people to not join the Yakuza, and they actively tell people that this isn't a good life. It acknowledges the role that organized crime played in building the world. Maybe to a fault, as many of the games are about a government Yakuza conspiracy. From what I've read in interviews with real-life Yakuza talking about the games, it's accurate in the plots that Kiryu finds himself unraveling. The characters also aren't the standard leads you'll find in the crime genre. They aren't guys trying to find a quick buck who eventually end up way in over their head. They aren't a bad guy trying and failing to do good, or just an irredeemable asshole. In fact, those are the type of guys they end up fighting. They are good guys trying their best to keep in line with their strong moral compass in a world of thieves. They may do bad things to bad people, but that doesn't make them bad guys, because they don't hurt the innocent and they don't cross a line. That's what I like about the protagonists in this series. They're usually great guys. I also find it doesn't glorify one side of that life. It shows the good and the bad equally as much. But when it's time for these characters to bash some heads in, ooh boy is it fun. The raids Kiryu, Ichi, and Tak go on are amazing and make story moments hit harder. It's helped by the combat and the great choreography and cutscenes. There were a few times where I failed a QTE because I was watching and enjoying it. It can turn into a good action movie at times, and it gets so ridiculous. And it becomes peak gaming as a result. The ones that stuck with me the most are the first big ones from 0 and 7. 7's was the first one I went through, and it was so entertaining watching Ichiban and Co. fumble their way through a headquarters. Like a Dragon has the best fist fights in all of gaming. At its best, if some of this shit was in a movie, it would be jaw-dropping. The games really stretch the X character doesn't kill to its limit. The combat is pretty good without them, but the heat actions are what put it over the edge. It's just so satisfying beating up on everyone in these games. And it somehow translates pretty well to a turn-based RPG. I just love this series so much. That's why I've been sitting here for 15 minutes talking about this series, and I still have more to say about the individual games. Spoilers coming up, by the way. If you want to avoid spoilers for a specific saga, here are the time codes. They're also in the description, or you could just skip right to the conclusion. And obviously, we gotta start with the games that follow the man that started it all.
起きておくれよ頼むから起きておくれよいつまでも起きてこないよ俺も寝よっかな
This section took me the longest to write. It doesn't help that I played most of the games in it over a year ago. There's so much in this one saga, I had to limit what I talked about. I think the best course of action is to talk about Kiryu and the two people closest to him, and some other stuff about each game. More so than any of the other protagonists, Kiryu struggles with having a moral compass in a world of thieves. It's not the only part of his character, but it's one that gets emphasized in Yakuza 0. This game is a great starting point for the series because it tests that key part of his character. All while this game has a strong conspiracy that might literally be happening right now. At the start of the game, Kiryu is hired by a loan shark to shake some guy down for money. Later on, that guy is killed, something we know Kiryu didn't and wouldn't do, and he is blamed. He's kicked out of the family because it draws unwanted attention to the empty lot that he was found in. This sends Kiryu down a rabbit hole to clear his name with the help of a man named Tachibana. He's one of the best characters in the whole series, and I wish I had more time to talk about him. Kiryu's side of the story works so well because the game is slowly pushing him to the edge. Same thing with Majima. I was attached to Majima more than I was attached to Kiryu in the game's opening chapters. He just has a way better introduction. But this scene, where Kiryu is willing to let Nishiki, his best friend, kill him to make his life easier because of all the trouble Kiryu is causing, is goated. It just shows how much he cares about the people in his life. While the game is slowly pushing these characters, there's one key difference between the two. Majima's sworn brother is in jail, and he can't stop him from going over the edge. Nishiki is able to stop Kiryu right before he kills someone.
超えちゃならねえその一線超えちまったら戻ってこられなくなる勝手に先は死んじゃねえよ兄弟踏みとどまれいつか最後の一線を越えなきゃならねえ時が来たらそん時は俺も一緒に越えてやる
And what he says is so powerful because of what Kiryu ends up doing in Yakuza 1 when Nishiki crosses that line. Along with that great arc for Kiryu, this game has some of the best side content in the whole series. Karaoke is the most memorable in this game, the disco is great, the whole game is just extremely gifable. The side quests are extremely iconic. There's a few fights that have stuck with me throughout the whole series, including the final boss, mostly thanks to the cutscene afterwards. Zero does what every good prequel should do and sets up the base for the lead character. Kiryu's moral compass is solidified, and the ending of this game perfectly leads into Yakuza 1. And Yakuza Kiwami 1 was the first game I slowed down on in this series. It was because of the side content. Outside of Majima everywhere, everything in it was just fine. A lot of the side quests just boiled down to, will Kiryu fall for this very obvious scam? Select yes or no, right now. The story is what saves this game for me. Kiryu loses so much in it. A lot of characters I just assumed would become mainstays throughout the whole series are killed off. The conspiracy of the day revolves around the clan Kiryu is a part of, the Tojo clan, missing 10 billion yen, and somehow this girl finds herself at the center of it. Yakuza 1 adds 2 more pillars to Kiryu's character. The world is starting to leave him behind. At the beginning of the game, he's sent to jail after taking the fall for a murder that Nishiki did, and once he's released, he's missed so much. At this point, as the games go on, the bad guys become meaner and meaner. Ending off in 6, where the Yakuza world has changed so much, guys don't even have tattoos anymore. On the surface, that doesn't really feel like anything, but that means something in this series. There's so many fights in this series that start with each guy ripping off his shirt and exposing his back tattoo. Great way to set a mood for a fight. But in this fight in 6, in the game where I would say the world has advanced too much for Kiryu, it's a bit of a shock when you see this guy's back. The other aspect of Kiryu that starts in this game is Dad Kiryu, which is brought out through Haruka. Kiryu has a strict no-killing rule, especially after the events of Zero. Please ignore what's behind me right now. He's a better man than I, because every single time someone tries to kidnap or hurt Haruka, which happens a fucking lot in this series, I'd enter full murder mode. Kiryu might not, but I'll kill to save her. Out of all of the parent-child relationships in video games, which there's a lot of for some reason, this one is my favorite. In a lot of the games that I've seen where you're taking care of a kid, the situation is extraordinary. So when you're finally able to find some calm during a zombie apocalypse, you're able to have a great moment between the characters. Kiryu and Haruka live in a normal world, so there are moments in these games where you're able to go around town with her. It's basically her asking you if it's okay if you go do something, like be virtual on, despite the fact that it's hard as shit. I'm playing on a fucking Xbox controller. This is what it looks like in the arcade. Give me a break. I find the quality time that they spend together more relatable here than in other games, because it's still grounded in our reality. You're just walking around a normal town with your daughter. And in general, there's just a lot of moments throughout the series of Kiryu parenting her. It's just nice seeing a relationship like this in a real world setting. That relationship and a few other things is what I want to spend the rest of this section talking about. Mostly because if I don't, this section is going to be over an hour. After losing so much in Yakuza 1, Kiryu gains a reason to live. To me, he always felt a little aimless in this game. Finding Haruka and adopting her gave him some purpose. He leaves the Tojo immediately after being named 4th chairman to live as a civilian, something that does not last. We're in game 2 of 7 after all. Speaking of 2s, Yakuza Kiwami 2 is one of the best games in the whole series. The story is a ride to go on, thanks to the introduction of 3 new characters. Ryuji Goda is the best villain Kiryu goes up against. If you want proof, I remember his full name after playing this game once in 2021. In many ways, the two are kind of similar, backed by what we see of Ryuji in Yakuza 0, but in very key ways they're different. That's why it was a blast seeing these two clash. Another important character that Kiryu parents throughout the series is introduced here, Daigo, the son of the man Nishiki killed in the first game, which is a crime everyone still thinks Kiryu did. Daigo is a great character that I wish got more screen time in this game. He kind of splits the Kiryu parenting hour with Haruka. As a result, I feel like there's some development that we missed for him that happens in between 2 and 3. It doesn't change the fact that Kiryu clearly left such a big impact on him during 2. Kiryu is why he's able to become the leader of the Tojo clan in 3. 2 also starts the trend of constantly calling Kiryu former 4th chairman of the Tojo clan. I find it funny because he had the job for seconds before quitting at the end of Yakuza 1. I get that it's a prestigious job in this game's criminal underworld, but it's still funny. Also, I eat up these character intros. The third great character in this game is Sayama. She's the perfect love interest for Kiryu, which makes sense. That's what she was designed to be. She's a badass like him, has a similar backstory, and loses her father in the first game she's in. She's honestly one of the best characters in this series, and then she's told to fuck off to America after this game. She's never seen again, and I will never forgive them for this. Kiwami 2 is a perfect sequel that cranks up everything just enough, which is something I wish I could say about Yakuza 3. I feel bad for it because when you're playing through the entire series on Game Pass, they go from looking like a late PS4 game to an early PS3 game. It's a rough transition. I don't really have a lot to say about this game. I know some people give the orphanage section at the start some flack, but I like seeing Kiryu in dad mode. I found that the revelations were the only good side content they added, at least from what I can remember. The final raid at the hospital to save Daigo has always stuck with me. I don't know why, I just really enjoyed it. Rikiya is a solid character, and his death hurt a lot. I think Kiryu saw a lot of himself in Riki. As the world gets filled with more and more monsters, he's a genuine good guy. After all of the death Kiryu has seen throughout this series, seeing someone he wants to see more of in this life die hurt him so much. This game also ends on a massive cliffhanger of Kiryu getting stabbed right in front of Haruka, which is super mean because in Yakuza 4, there's 4 stories. It takes a long time for you to see Kiryu, and you play as him last. 4 and 5, I'm sadly going to have to skip a lot of. There's just so much in this game that's intertwined with all of the different playable characters. Again, I'm trying to have this section be under an hour. Very quickly, though. It's great. The new protagonists that stick around are fun. I'm a big fan of these two. This game shows that the life Kiryu has chosen is starting to take a toll on Haruka. The scene where she confronts the man who stabbed him at the end of 3 is amazing. We've never seen her hold so much hate towards someone. And that whole thing leads to a great heart-to-heart between the two. She's still a kid at this point and doesn't fully understand what's going on, or why Kiryu has to believe what that man is saying. With Daigo in this game, Kiryu has to set him back on the right path as he strayed too far from it. And Daigo got a very good reminder to keep himself in check. After the story, I feel like Kiryu is finally ready to put this life behind him. He makes sure Daigo is going to be doing a good job. Akiyama can do a great job of helping the streets. And Saejima could keep the Tojo in check when Kiryu isn't able to. This is all great timing for Kiryu because this is clearly having an effect on Haruka, which is what makes some of the events of Yakuza 5 sad. Haruka takes a crack at becoming an idol in this game, and her manager forces Kiryu out of her life. I guess having your father be an ex-Yakuza could be very bad for your reputation, so he leaves and becomes a cab driver in a different town to support his kids. Just another reminder that Kiryu is the best dad. What brings him out of this quiet life is Daigo disappearing after he gives him a cab ride. While Kiryu is pulled deeper and deeper back into the crime world, something he's clearly not happy about. At the same time, Haruka is pursuing her dreams of becoming an idol. For some reason, this crime game is about dreams. Playable Haruka was something I wasn't expecting from this series. Wasn't sure what it was going to be like, because the normal Like a Dragon stuff wouldn't really work with a 16-year-old girl. So she has a dance-off with people. And it's a rhythm game. The minigames are meet and greets, live performances, TV show appearances, and interviews. Obviously, the 5th game in this series was destined to have an idol sim in it. Over the story, Haruka realizes her dreams aren't worth abandoning her family. She has a heartwarming moment on stage where she decides she's not going to hide her family anymore, and then she runs off to find Kiryu, bloodied in the streets, after a really entertaining boss fight. It's a very similar moment to 3's ending. He couldn't stop himself from helping Daigo. After a game that shows how far he will go for Haruka and Daigo, and a series that shows how unshakable this man is, they put him through a quick series of events that will break him. Yakuza 6 sends him to prison for what he did in 5. Once he's released, it's revealed shortly after he went to prison, Haruka ran because the media was harassing her in the orphanage. And pretty recently, she was hit by a car while holding her child, Haruto, and putting her in a coma because Yakuza is just a soap opera where guys rip off their shirts on top of buildings and fight. This is the one thing that can shake Kiryu. You can tell he's not really thinking straight in this game, which is why he technically kidnaps Haruto. After he takes Haruto, he tries to find his father. Much like Haruka herself, Haruto's bloodline puts him in the center of a massive conspiracy. As Kiryu fights to protect this baby and uncovers everything, he finally, after 7 games of this exposes something that goes too high up and becomes a target for the rest of his life. But he's given the choice to disappear or be a risk to everyone he cares about. There are points in the series where logic stretches too far just to get some dramatic character moments. Rubber bullets. The whole thing Kiryu uncovers kind of really jumps the shark, but at least it leads to some good character moments. With Kiryu's final goodbye to Haruka and his heartfelt letter to Daigo, a character that he has fought so hard for and has tried his best to parent since Yakuza 2. While I wish we did get more Daigo, it is my biggest problem with this whole saga. His letter to him is a beautiful goodbye, and it changed how I saw their relationship. And the final scene with Kiryu is perfect. Everyone at the orphanage is cheering on Haruto as he learns to walk. We get a brief glimpse of how good of a mother Haruka is going to be. That little moment with Haruto and Kiryu is great, as one takes his first steps in life, the other takes his last in this series. It isn't his last anymore, but originally it was supposed to be. Finishing the Kiryu saga left a hole in me that finishing some of my favorite shows did. I got so attached to the key players, and at the time that I finished 6, it was going to be the last time I was going to see any of them. Kiryu Saga in general feels like a very good run of a TV show. I really wish I could have talked about each game more. I barely talked about Majima, Saejima, and Akiyama. There's some side stuff I wanted to cover that I don't have the time for. This saga, this series deserves a massive deep dive. Despite going through it and hitting some important notes, I feel like I've barely covered what I wanted to say. But that's for later. It's time to talk about the first mainline game to not have Kiryu as the protagonist. After 7 games all following the same character, it's going to be hard having a new series protagonist. Kiryu is such an amazing character, it's hard to follow him up. Ichiban dashed those worries very quickly. Takayuki Yagami took the longest for me to get attached to. Comparing early game talk to early game Kiryu and Ichi, he's just fine. It took many hours into the story until I finally got attached to him. It was this scene that did it for me.
And I swear I'm gonna get you out of here. I promise. Sorry, I should have said that to you a lot sooner. What was I doing these 3 years? I didn't do a damn thing to help you. Will you give me another chance?
There was just something about him until that point that didn't really resonate with me. I don't blame the story though. I like this change of pace. Following a detective adjacent to the crime world is a great way to keep the series' identity while giving Judgment its own. The story is good in this one, but I found it pretty predictable. The conspiracy our detective friend has to uncover involves a string of murders where all of the victims had their eyes gouged out. I didn't really get into the plot until around a third of the way into the game, but once I did, the game started to get way better, and it was so satisfying seeing my predictions come true. The only things I couldn't really pin down were who exactly the killer was and why the Yakuza were involved. And when I first revealed them all, holy shit was I scared. This dude is a fucking killing machine. That's something both Judgment games do very well. The main guy committing the murders is very threatening. And overall, this new cast was pretty solid. The other antagonists are good. The Gender Law Boys are great. Tsukimoto is definitely my least favorite out of the main characters. He's fine. Sugiura and Higashi are amazing. Sugiura may have more connection to the story, being related to the girl that was murdered during the game. But Higashi is so entertaining, I don't really care that his connection isn't as strong. And Kaito is one of my favorite characters in the whole series. He is so great. The story and characters are great in this, but I wish the side content was better. I only really enjoyed the VR board game. Going through the series in order kind of hurt this game for me because it was the 9th one I played. Every 3rd or 4th game I just end up slowing down on. But there was one part of this game that I really loved, and I didn't take it in until the credits. I loved seeing Tak and Kaito together. Their friendship is what I was expecting to get out of Kiryu and Nishiki's for the whole series. This studio is really good at writing best buds, and it was so satisfying finally seeing a lifelong friendship carry from game to game. While I started kind of lukewarm on this game, I ended up really enjoying it by the end. And when I finished it, I was so excited to get to Lost Judgment, and holy shit, did it not disappoint. Right away, I loved how much of a step up it felt. They changed the trailing missions. Thank God. I didn't even bring it up when I was talking about Judgment, but those fucking sucked. They added a bunch of different gameplay styles. Climbing, sneaking, trailing, and chasing are all in Tak's kit now. It helps keep the game fresh when one mission has you sneaking around the school and then climbing off the roof to escape. The amount of fighting styles have increased from Judgment's 2 to 3. 4 if you have the DLC. Crane is such a blast and might be one of my favorites in the whole series. I loved being able to disarm enemies or OHKO any scared ones. The game has some of my favorite combat in the whole series, and I really love how it uses heat. The main reason why I loved it is because of how satisfying the combos are. Like this one I found. That is so fucking fun to do. It's crazy how the amount of different playstyles isn't exclusive to the combat and climbing things. This might have the most diverse minigame selection in the whole series, or at the very least, it feels like it does. The main story has you investigating a high school for bullying. That leads to you being the head of the detective club. That leads to you uncovering a mystery that a student is investigating. Throughout that investigation, you unlock 10 minigames. Again, this series is known for its minigames, but it's never attached them all into one big side quest before. It puts more story than what would have gone into those minigames in the past. It's easily the most effort they've ever put into side content, excluding the photography club. Adding more narrative to gameplay stuff is always a money move. It's a great example of how this series is better because of how much they reuse assets. All of the side stuff with the budget and the amount of dev time this series has wouldn't be possible without it. Some people shit on games when they reuse assets, but it's not a bad thing. It can be lazy development, but the series does it so it can do stuff like this without ballooning the budget and time. I've been talking about this game for a decent bit, and I haven't even started talking about one of my favorite parts of it, the story. The conspiracy of how everything connects to one murder from the beginning of the game is so fun to unravel. It does an excellent job of weaving every aspect of the plot together. The story of a former teacher helping the parents of kids who took their lives to bullying by murdering their kids' bullies was one I wasn't expecting. Kuwana was a character I thought was fine at first, but the more I learned about him, the more interesting the game got. Which is crazy because I was invested in this game very early on. He's one of my favorite villains in the whole series. He's a guy trying to atone for the sins of his past by trying to drag as many monsters as he can down to hell with him. Easily one of the most layered characters in the whole series. I want to replay it soon, seeing how he acts throughout the whole game, knowing the twist. And he isn't the only great villain in this game. Soma is fucking terrifying. Again, both of these guys feel like forces of nature. What really shows how much of a monster he is what he does to Sawa. Important characters have died in this series. So have civilians. Sawa's fucking hurt the most. Kawana forced many of his older students into his whole bully murder ring. All of those former students were bullies who drove a kid to attempt to take his own life. And she was the only one to speak up about the bullying. And he ignored it. That's one of her connections to this whole conspiracy, and she did the right thing in that scenario. Her other connection, and her only mistake, is being forced to stay silent by the system after a student of her own was bullied over the edge. And the school forced her to be silent so they wouldn't lose a lawsuit. It was a mistake that stuck with her for the rest of her life. She didn't deserve to get involved at all. So seeing her lifeless was heartbreaking. It's easily the most effective death in the whole series. From all of the chaos that happened before it, including a very near-death experience for Talk, to returning to her complex where everything is quiet, only to find her apartment in complete shambles, and her body on the floor. I remember when I was in high school, I was playing something on my 3DS while watching something on TV. It was right when The Fault in Our Stars came out, and my sister was reading it while she was waiting for some friends to pick her up. She walked into the living room, said he wasn't supposed to die, yeeted the book at the couch, and left. One of the funniest memories I have. Anyways, that's exactly how I felt internally about Sawa's death. She didn't deserve to die. Nope, that ain't Chief. Don't do that. Try again. And that feeling is what makes it so effective. Thanks, I hate it, but I like it. Her death affects a lot of the characters and greatly complicates the relationship between Talk and Kawana. And it really shows how far Kawana is willing to go when it shows just how little he cares about the casualties. It's just so effective. In general, this game does a very good job of having very strong moments every few chapters to keep you invested. Lost Judgment is fantastic. The entire game is just an absolute banger. Every now and then I'll just slow down on this series for a game or two. Then RGG just casually walks in and is like, hey, I'm about to give you one of the best games that you've ever played. Again. For the 4th time. Judgment's good, and Lost Judgment is just so fantastic. It might have taken a lot longer, but these spin-off games really earned my enjoyment. And now it's time to talk about the game that started it all for me.
耐え合わせりゃまだ早いぜどん底から夢見た姿へ俺と成り上がろう
Right off the bat, I would have taken a bullet for Ichi. That would have been helpful during the game. He's just the nicest guy. The opening of 7 does a great job establishing that. He cares about the streets that raised him so much. He's willing to risk his finger to help out some kids that got scammed out of some money. You can tell that he owes a lot to the city and the head of his family. He cares so much he's willing to take the fall for a murder he didn't commit. Sounds like someone else we know. Which kicks off a whole plot that involves the Yakuza and the government. Where did he come up with that completely original idea, game? It's a fun conspiracy to unravel, which is in line with the entire series. Where it shines is telling the story of a man hitting and climbing out of rock bottom multiple times. Ichi's journey was released at the perfect time. People hitting the lowest point in their lives, who could relate to that in 2020? It's a very simple arc, but it's one that feels good going through. It's so good, I made an entire video about this game's ending immediately after beating it. One death from Lost Judgment might be one of the most impactful deaths I've seen in a game in a long time, but that doesn't discount how heartbreaking 7's ending is. To quickly go over it because I've already talked about it, having a villain with such close ties to Ichi die right after his redemption is heartbreaking. In moments before, just listen to Ichiban begging him to put the gun down.
This may not be what you want to hear, but you know, I consider you my brother, man. That means something to me. Don't make me watch my brother die. Please. I can't do it. Masato. I'm begging you.
There are 4 scenarios where someone doesn't find this scene sad. 1, you find this whole situation and game ridiculous. 2, you don't care about any of these guys. 3, you don't have any empathy towards them. 4, you can't relate to Ichi in this scenario because you don't have any friends. Is that too harsh? I know I've talked about this ending before, but it still needs to be said. Masato dying at the moment when he decides to climb out of rock bottom at the place where these two got mixed up as babies. Amazing writing ending it at the place where everything started. Ichi gains and loses so much in this game. The story is great when it's not doing one of its multiple 20-minute long exposition dumps, one of which has a built-in washroom break. This game was my first entry into the series, and I was blown away by all of the stuff in it. The amount of fun minigames is insane. Dude, it has a kart racer and a real estate sim. Like, fucking what? From this game alone, I could tell just how much care and effort went into the side content. Like with all of the fake movies you could go watch. The combat was simple, but addicting. The job system is good, made even better by the fact that you change jobs at a placement company. It has such a love for JRPGs. One of the reasons why I picked it up was because the series was turning into a turn-based RPG. And all of the summons, having now played the rest of the series, are such a love letter to it. Dude, I popped off so fucking hard when I found out you fight Gary Buster Holmes in Yakuza 1. Oh dude, and the party is fantastic. Ichi, again, is fucking amazing. Namba's my boy. Adachi is everybody's favorite uncle that's half drunk all of the time. Makoto's sister from Persona 5 rounds out the main 4 very well. All of the party members are great. With how many characters disappeared from Kiryu's saga, I'm kind of worried if we're going to see the whole party together again. That's how much I enjoyed seeing them all together. I want them all to stick around. But I feel like there's a greater reason why I got attached to these characters. Yakuza 7 released right when Canada started to shut down again during the pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, I love going around downtown, and I couldn't do that with my friends at all that year. Thanks to this game, I was able to play through what I couldn't experience, while having a lead going through rock bottom, only to come out stronger. That's why I love Ichiban so much. I think so many people were just able to relate to him when this game came out. His personality is just perfect for this series too. There are times where I find Kiryu and Talk wouldn't get into some of these side quests. I believe Ichi would get involved in some of this weird shit and see it through. The dub is also a massive step up from the original Yakuza 1.
Haruka, listen. Your mother is... Shut the hell up. Don't you dare.
I think my favorite thing about the current state of the series are the types of topics that these last 2 games have chosen to cover. 7 focuses a lot on the gray areas of the city and talks about the systematic issues that leads to people becoming homeless or having to go into sex work. Lost Judgment focuses on the impact bullying can have on so many people. Just not the type of topics I would expect from crime stories in a video game. Like a Dragon with its writing, its characters, its gameplay, its minigames. Means a lot to me. I love it so much. I always see people talking about how games are getting stale. Finding this series has proven to me that they're just looking in the wrong places. Play this series. Play any random number in any random order. I don't care. But if you do play them, play something else in between the games so you don't get burnt out. We are in a sea of broken AAA games and toxic multiplayer monetization. And the people I see claiming they're getting burnt out on games are only playing those. This series and other AA games I've played are what games should be. They have emotional stories. They're just trying to be as entertaining as possible. And that's why this series is perfect at what it's trying to be. If you just have to play one game, I'd recommend 0, 7, or Lost Judgment. 0 is the start of all things Kiryu and is one of the best in the whole series. Majima's at his best in it too. 7 is a very good reboot. You know how much I love Ichiban. If you like turn-based RPGs, this one is a great one to play. Lost Judgment is the most recent at the time of recording, and is also one of the best. It turns everything up from Judgment, and again, blew me away. Anyways, let's do a tier list quickly. In the Yakuza 3 tier, is Yakuza 3. It's the weakest of the whole series, but still is a good game. RGG has just done better with every other game. In B tier is Kiwami 1 and Judgment. From a story perspective, both of these games are phenomenal, but I found the gameplay a bit lacking. A tier is 4, 5, and 6. They're all great games, but they each have stuff holding them back from being amazing. But they all have some amazing things that keep them from falling behind. S tier is 0, Kiwami 2, 7, and Lost Judgment. All of these games made me feel things, and each one was an absolute blast to play. The only reason why I wouldn't recommend 2 as one of the ones that you should play is because it really feels like the second season of a show. Not in a bad way, I just think it wouldn't land the same. But the crazy thing about this whole video is I still feel like I have a lot to say about this series. I would love to make multiple videos where I dedicate like 2 to 3 hours for each game. But man, that will take so fucking long. I just wanted to get my general thoughts out about the entire series and each game. I can do a massive deep dive later. It feels like a Dragon has been with me for so long, and I can't wait for the future of the series. Please, go play it. So the initial bit I had planned to end this video kind of doesn't work anymore. I was going to talk about how I don't really know what to do now because I'm done the entire series, and I guess I just have to wait for the inevitable Yakuza 8 announcement. And much like with my 2022 Game of the Year video, those plans were ruined. Yeah, so, do you agree? Think I'm an idiot? Comment down below. Dislike the video if you still don't think you should play any of these games. And subscribe for more bad content. Follow me on other platforms if you want. Take care, guys.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.